Hey guys, and welcome to the Fish Room. I'm Rachel O'Leary and it's time for a Tuesday tip. Today I thought I would do something that a few of you have asked for, and that is how to maintain a planted shrimp tank. I'm in front of my little nano here, which is way overdue for some maintenance, and I've gathered together the tools that I generally use. Now on this tank, I probably don't do maintenance as often as I should. It's like every 2 to 3 weeks I'll do about a 30%. So the tools I've gathered together today are a bucket, a small gauge tube, my pincers, my scissors, a chopstick, a rubber band, and an algae scraper. So what I generally do when I'm getting started is to clean the glass first. So I use a little plastic scraper, a razor blade works, whatever your method of favorite tool is fine. And I go and I clean my glass first, and I do that because then when I do my water change, I'll get all the junk that I'm scraping off. And this tank doesn't get a whole lot of dirt on the glass, luckily, but there is a little bit. Now you may remember that there's dwarf amber barbs and about 1 million crystal reds and crystal blacks in here. This is the tank that I shot in for both of those videos. And generally I only clean the front glass. I leave the rest for grazing surfaces. But that's entirely up to you. I'm not that picky. So now that I've done that, I'm going to take my tube and my chopstick. And the reason I'm doing this is so that I can poke into the substrate a little bit and try and get out any mulm. Shrimp tanks in particular are very prone to secondary pests like planaria or hydra or even detritus worms, mainly because they graze constantly, so when you feed them they pick the food apart and it kind of goes everywhere. So this is a way that I can disrupt the substrate pretty carefully and still be able to siphon out the mulm. I also use this small gauge tube because it's a slower draw. So what I'm doing here is I'm just poking into the substrate in between plants to disrupt some of the mulm. Now it can be really hard to not mess up the roots and your planting in these heavier planted tanks, so this is a way that I can do that and still keep my tank nice and clean for shrimp. I'll also at this time sort of wave my chopstick and siphon over the top of any of the rhizome plants. You can see the amount of gunk that's coming out of this. Now if you notice that you're siphoning too fast, which happens a lot on a shrimp tank since you don't want to get rid of much volume, you can simply pinch your hose and that slows down the draw in the tank. It is exceptionally important though to make sure that you maintain these well, both for the health of the plants but mainly the health of the shrimp. Using this small diameter hose as well also means that we're not sucking up all our shrimp. Now I've pulled about 200 shrimp out of this tank in the past few weeks, and there's still quite a few in there. And I always do shrimp tanks into a bucket, and even though I have drain ports all around my fish room, it's still not uncommon to suck up a few shrimp in the siphon. Generally they're fine, but before I pour my bucket out I let all the detritus settle, and then I can net out any shrimp that I accidentally siphon. So next I'm going to trim my plants, which this tank, because it's all low light, doesn't need a whole lot. It would also be at this time, if I was going to, that I would rinse out my sponges. There's some pellia in here that I didn't place in here, so I'm going to use my tongs to get rid of that. There's also some little fragments of driftwood that I don't particularly want in there. I'm really pleased because it seems like finally my crypt parva is growing in this tank. I think I'm going to trim back this bucephalandra as well. It's just a little too big here in the front. Now I'll save that for another tank. That's a nice plant. Now I think one of the hardest things about maintaining a shrimp tank or a tank that is heavily planted like this is refilling it without destroying everything and stirring everything up. And there's a pretty simple tool that can help with that, and that's simply a colander. Now I got this one at the dollar store for obviously $1, but I mean you could easily use the one from your kitchen as well. I just prefer to keep my own set of tools down here. And all I do with that is simply angle it across the tank. And all this does is it disperses the water so it doesn't have that jet into the tank. You can see it just goes through all the little holes and it fills things up nicely. I mean, you could also just trickle your water in, but I find this to be a more time efficient way to fill a planted tank. Now I don't fill this tank the entire way up to the top. I stop it just below the rim. I can take off my colander and you can see by filling that way I didn't blow all the detritus around. At this point, if I wanted to get rid of duckweed or the red root floater that's in here or any plant trimmings, I would use a small net to do so. Since I didn't really have to do much trimming on this tank since it's all low light, I'm just going to wipe down my glass and make sure I didn't miss cleaning any spots. It's important to wipe down the glass so you don't get any water spots or residual marks on it that can look unsightly. So that's it. That's how I maintain my planted shrimp tanks. Hope that helps. Make sure you stop by my Facebook as well as my website, MsJinx.com, where you can find my upcoming speaking engagements, my current stock list, and information on all things nano. I also really enjoy getting pictures of videos of the critters you guys have gotten from me. So if you want to send them to me through my email or through my business Facebook, that would be great. And as always, if you have any questions or specific topics you'd like me to discuss, let me know in the comments below.